Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for joining us this morning from wherever you are. We're three property angels. We are three ladies with former professional careers. Myself as a solicitor, Karen as an accountant, and Sam as a police detective. And as you know, we do interviews with successful property entrepreneurs every Thursday morning at 9 AM. And this morning, we're really excited to have with us Matt Siddell. Good morning, Matt.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
No problems. But before we get to Matt, perhaps you ladies could introduce yourself briefly. So Sam, if you could go first.
Hi there, my name is Sam Beddoe. As Sarah says, former police detective. I've been full-time in property 5 or 6 years now. My main property businesses are, I have service accommodation in the Southampton area, and I have a property development company, Revive Holdings. I've got experience in a variety of property models, be that single buy-to-lets, HMOs, rent-to-rent, flipping, auctions, title split, commercial conversion, working with private investors, working with pension funds. So a bit of a variety there. So that's a little bit about me.
Karen?
So I started off as an accountant. Well, somebody has to, right? But I soon saw the light and I escaped that land. I then went into project and program management and strategic business consultancy in big blue chip industry. I left that world in May 2015, bringing with me the skills I learned and starting to build a property business from solid foundations. And now I continue to do that, as well as helping newbies to the industry craft strategic plans to give them clarity on their destination. Thanks, Sarah. Back to you quickly.
Thanks, Karen. My name's Sarah Smith. I bought my first property in 2004, very much to live in, no idea about investment at the time. And 2 years later, I went to move house and my broker said, hey, you can keep this property, rent it out, and also buy the next one. And I did that 4 times, very slowly. But by the time I had 4 properties, I thought, oh, this property thing's quite interesting. And I started buying HMOs. As I say, I was working as a solicitor in London, and in 2016, my property was bringing me in more money than my job as a solicitor, at which point I left that world and went full-time property. Since then, I've just been building my own portfolio. I've done other bits and pieces. I started an estate agency, ran that for 4 years. I sold my shares in April 2019, that is. I've done a few projects with Sam here. We've done flips, title splitting, auction bits and pieces. A very long time ago, we had a rent-to-rent business. And yeah, that's me. I also host Partners in Property with these 2 lovely ladies. So if we can hand back to Karen, who is leading the interview today.
Brilliant. And welcome again, Matt. So winding back to the start of how you started out, tell us a bit about how you went from being an offshore investment manager to starting Kin. What was that all about?
I don't know where to start because I worked in Jersey for a few years. That's a very long story, but long story short, there was quite an unfortunate incident in 2001, just after I graduated from university, and I had to leave London quite quickly. I was attacked in a pub in Notting Hill, and it all got a little bit out of control. And during the court trial, the guy who had stabbed me repeatedly got hold of my address, which was less than ideal because 19 years later, he's still in jail, and he was obviously quite keen to avoid that. But anyway, I ended up in Jersey for 3 years, trying to make sure that these guys couldn't get a hold of me. And I worked there for a few years, and I decided I was going to start my own business. I actually lost my dad during the 3 years that I was in Jersey. I lost my father in an accident, and he'd always said, if you want to make lots of money, don't get a well-paid job because you'll never leave it. And he was quite right. And within 12 months of his accident, I'd used all my savings because I didn't go out very much in Jersey, and there's no VAT there, and I was being paid a comfortable salary, so I'd saved up some cash. And I started a business called Kin, and Kin used to track down the blood relatives of people who died and not left a will, because the blood relatives are potentially able to claim that inheritance. So started it with a donated fax machine from my old firm, and I had this big laptop that was huge. I mean, it was really big. And a computer that my old firm had thrown together for us, and donated fax machine. And in the first year, we found a bunch of beneficiaries, and the contracts were worth about £300,000. In year 2, that money started coming in, and that's how we started to grow the business. But for the first year, I was sleeping in the spare room of one of my brother's apartments. I didn't get my hair cut. My hair was out here. I didn't spend a penny. I didn't have anything, any spare cash to throw around or anything. But as you can imagine, in year 2, when that £300,000 comes in, you can start growing a proper business. And in the second year, we did 500 grand's worth of contracts. In the third year, we did £1 million worth of contracts. In the fourth year, we did about £2 million worth of contracts. And when the world fell apart in 2008, all my mates were leaving their jobs, or their jobs were being taken away from them. There were quite a few of them worked at Lehman Brothers, and they ended up at banks like Nomura. But I remember them telling me, like, the whole world's fallen apart. This is a complete disaster. But it didn't really affect my business, because the government would advertise the estates every week at midnight Wednesday, and we used to work through the night to try and compete against firms that have been around for over 100 years to find the beneficiaries and negotiate terms with them, so that if they did receive something, they'd get a share of the inheritance and we'd get a commission. And if they didn't receive anything, then it's like a no-win, no-fee basis. So that was good fun. But as I said, like, the credit crunch didn't affect me. I grew my business throughout 2008 and 2009. But a friend of mine from school phoned me up at the end of 2008 and said, Matt, I'm doing a deal with Barratt. They've got 12 apartments at a development in Wandsworth, and they can't sell them, and they're going cheap. And do you want to buy one? And I basically refinanced my apartment, pulled out some cash. But as I went to do the deal, I checked in with all my friends who were in property at that time, and all my friends who were in the city. And they all said, don't buy any property, you're going to lose all your money. And I thought, well, that sounds really terrible. But I couldn't find anyone that thought it was a good idea, apart from my friend who was bringing me the opportunity. And I knew very little then. I'd bought a flat in 2000 in Notting Hill in Ladbroke Grove, but I didn't live in it for very long because someone stabbed me in the face. And then, but I remember asking Connor, because I'd been so focused on my air hunting business. And I said to Connor, I was like, he said, the yield's really good. It's like 7.5%, 8% in Wandsworth. And I said, just remind me what a yield is again. He said, you get the rent, you divide it by the property. I was like, okay, and how can I make sure that, how can I check this against other properties? Not knowing to use the word comparable. I knew very little. So, yeah, no one said it was a good idea. They all said I was going to lose my money. So instead of buying one, I bought 2. And I trebled my money in 2 years. It was one of the best deals I ever did.
That's really good. And then along came the internet. And I gather from talking to you before, that was what really started squeezing kin. Internet and the ability for people to use it themselves, right?
Yeah, so we saw that coming a while off, and we knew that the money was in the contingency fees, and we knew that the profit was in the inefficiency of tracing the next of kin. So you could go for very, very difficult cases like the Welsh cases, which were all Jones and Lewis and Davies and Williams and not much else. And those were really tough because the records were huge and they were all on microfiche. You'd have to search through the births and then wade through the marriages, and we'd have ex-cops all around the country searching register offices, and a team of researchers in the office on Curzon Street, where we had all the lower ground floor. In fact, if you go to Little House now, if you go to the toilets at Little House, if you're a gentleman, the urinal is where my desk used to be, but it wasn't a toilet back then. It was quite a nice office. But anyway, yeah, so we knew that Ancestry.com had started digitizing them. We'd already started digitizing our own records. I had a team of 300 people in India who were digitizing all these microfiche and putting them into a database so that we could search the records more flexibly, because obviously the microfiche were alphabetized, but if you can digitize it, you can just dive straight in, pull out the records you need, and do some other funky stuff, which would just enable you to find stuff that no one else could find. But eventually Ancestry.com and another guy who was a competitor, who's a friend of mine now, their two businesses had digitized all the indexes, and where Ancestry.com had gaps, the other one didn't. And everybody could just do Smith, mother's maiden name, Siddell, and you'd find the records very, very quickly. And instead of going in at, maybe 25% or 30% of the inheritance, you'd go in at 5% and be up against it competing against the competition, and maybe you'd get a piece of the action at 3 or 4%, and it was just a complete bun fight. So that killed, that killed that period in air hunting, which was very profitable and a lot of fun, because there was no emotional involvement. We traced people all over the world, and we'd say, like, your grandmother was a cousin of someone who's died and left a house in Richmond, and your grandmother's family is entitled to an 8th if we're correct, and there are 7 other stems to the family tree. And we do this in good faith, and you can find us in newspaper articles, and here's our website, and we'd love to represent you. It was good.
Good fun. Good fun time. So after that moved on, did Reading come next, or was there something in between?
There was a little event in between. So all the property guys were getting really beaten up in 2009. And one in particular who came to my event in Knightsbridge, but didn't want to be on the website and didn't want to be anywhere. And he's not listed anywhere. If I mention his name, he won't like it. But he had, you were probably there, Karen. He's got like 2,000 apartments, all in central London, £2 billion portfolio. And he was trying to work out how someone else who's very, very well known in the property industry was tracing the owners of very valuable probate properties in Kensington and Hampstead and things like that. And he wanted to pick my brains on the tracing. And I had no idea who he was. And someone from his office came round to Curzon Street to speak to me. And she said, will you come and speak to Mr. X? And I thought it was just going to be her manager or something. But I went to meet this guy, and his office was like the size of this room, with French windows onto a garden in Mayfair, and couches and coffee table and desk. And I was like, oh geez, I thought I was doing really well. I was a bit of a cocky 29-year-old with my 911 turbo, and I thought, I was king of the world. And I realized, like, this guy was really in another stratosphere. So I struck up a rapport with him, and I told him how to do some of the tracing, and he worked out, what the other guy was doing, and he did some deals off the back of it. And then within 12 months, I realized that Kin had its day, but we had this debtors book that was about 4 million quid. And I realized that I literally sat by that time we were in an office on Oxford Street, and I sat there one night when the office was empty and everyone had gone. I just thought, if I pull that out, if we wind up the business, I can still claim entrepreneurs relief. Says 10% capital gains tax. That sounds good. Put it into property, leverage it. What's going to make me more money by the time I'm 40? Air hunting or property? And what would I do with this business if this business was one department of 10? Would I close this department? And the answer was, yeah, you'd wind it up, which was really sad, because one person in 6 years left that business, and everyone else we just hired and grew a really, really, really good team.
So it's like a family, really, an extended family.
Yeah, I sat in the boardroom with them, and I just told them, like, I've tried everything I can to give this business a future, but the landscape's changed. I cried my eyes out, and I made them all redundant. It was heartbreaking, but you get better at it as you get older. The highs and lows of business, the good times never last, the bad times never last. But I pulled all the money out. I also sent an email to a guy I knew who he'd had lots of bonuses. He worked for a very, very large asset manager. In fact, he retired a couple of years ago, so it's less sensitive now. But he worked for an asset manager, and his piece of the business was $2 trillion, which only leaves like one firm that he could have possibly worked for. And if you Google him, if you find him on Companies House associated with me and Googling, that's where I got that figure from, the news. But I knew he had his bonuses in cash, and I knew that he wouldn't like that, because inflation obviously erodes your cash. And I sent him an email, say, fancy a beer? I'm going through a bit of a rough patch for my business. Think I'm going to knock it on the head and do property instead. And what I wanted to do is open the door for him to say, oh, that sounds interesting, I'll come in. And he sort of did something a bit similar to me, which was like, well, property sounds interesting, I can help you. So we were both sort of courting each other, if you like. And long story short, we started Opulen together, and I started buying houses more aggressively. And I did my research, and I picked Reading, which was an absolute winner.
Yeah. A friend of mine's actually bought some of your properties, funnily enough.
Really?
Yes.
They're still standing?
They are still standing, and they're still doing extremely well. And I know when you cashed up out of Reading, you did very well. However,
which houses did he buy? Which street?
I can't remember, but I know he bought a couple of them from you. So yeah.
Is he a board director of a very large property consultancy, and him and his brother have got a large portfolio?
No. He's based in
Okay.
Reading, but we do know him both very well.
Okay.
I'll PM you offline.
Well, I was able to take the pick, you know, in 2012. I was just doing smash and grabs. As soon as the agents got it, before it went on Rightmove, bang, in I came, offer, cash, proof of funds, reference from the previous estate agents to say that I'd complete within 3 weeks, exchange and complete same day. The skip will be on the day that's on the driver same day. I don't chip. I treat people fairly, and but I had to explain to the agents what I was doing, because I think there was one firm in Reading who'd done a bit of it, but no one had done it quite as aggressively as I had. I said, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to convert the garage. I'm going to end up with 6 beds and it'll bring in 44 grand a year. And they're like, you what? And but it was good times.
They
Bought
were,
a few
and
off market.
nice. They had parking, and they were a little bit different at that time. But of course, lots of people have mirrored that since then. And
It turned into another bun fight. I don't like bun fights.
so
I also don't like knife fights. I've got a bad track record with those.
No surprise there. But also, you were running at the time one of the most prestigious networking events in London. And
Are networking events prestigious? I tried.
you had a great location and a good book and a good room at that time. So I wonder, I mean, that obviously brought you lots of contacts, but was it also that event that triggered the idea of Candor?
Yes, it was. So the difficulty you've got when you've got money is you're not forced to go out and network with other people. And when you network with other people, they're telling you stuff all the time that's really valuable. And when you're really properly plugged into what's going on in different parts of the country and who's doing what and how they're doing it and what the pitfalls are, your growth curve goes from sort of like that to more like that. And if you want exponential growth, you need to be surrounded with as many good people as you possibly can. So I thought, because I had a few mates and stuff, that I had sufficient information flow, but there was a load of stuff that was missing. And what I found was that the portfolio in Reading was bringing in £500,000 of rent after voids and what have you. And I became very bored, very frustrated. I wasn't making any more progress. And I thought, geez, I'm going to have to go and sort of jump into some of these networks, if you like, and go and meet a load of people. I'd done no property training. It really wasn't my cup of tea. I thought it was all very spammy and salesy. And if I did searches on Companies House, I didn't find much by way of a track record for the people who were offering it. And long story short, I noticed that Progressive were advertising for hosts, and I'd already jumped on Simon Zucchi's mastermind because I wanted to speak on his circuit, because you can't speak on his circuit unless you've been on his mastermind. So I was like, all right, sign me up to the mastermind. I actually did the reverse mastermind because I started with a portfolio and I finished with nothing. And but Progressive were going to allow me to be a bit more, have a little bit more autonomy over the way I did the event, the style, and I had a bit more freedom, which is what I wanted. It was a condition of the joint venture in setting up Knightsbridge. But the only venue we could find that was half reasonable price was the Royal Thames Yacht Club. And I thought, guys, anyone going to want to come to this? It sounds really up its own backside. And it's in Knightsbridge. And actually, even after I'd agreed to do it, I very nearly bottled it. I paid my fee to take the franchise and negotiated all of West London instead of just certain postcodes, because originally we were going to park it in Hammersmith. I'm glad I didn't, but I very nearly choked, and I had a guy called Charlie working with me at the time, and he pushed me into doing it. And I was useless at the beginning. I don't know if you were there at the first one, but I was awful. I was just dripping with sweat and standing with my back to everyone, reading off the slides, and but I got better.
No, I do remember, actually. And so that went on for a time. It was a good room. Lots of good people used to go. And then along came Candor. So do you want to tell us a bit more about Candor?
So, yeah, the thing about Knightsbridge is there'd be 150 people in the room every month. And there was always quite a lot of pressure on me because I was the organizer and I was speaking. I was trying to look after the guests. And we had some really good guests, like I think it was Reza's first public speaking appearance. No one really knew who Reza Merchant was at that time. Mike Ingle, who redeveloped Bloomsbury and developed Spinningfields in Manchester, developer of the decade. We had some really good speakers. So I was always quite distracted. I never had enough time to talk to people and work out who was who and what they were doing and really get to understand where the value for me was in the room, if you like. I was just there to look after everybody and host. But I wanted to know who was doing deals and where they were doing deals and where they were winning and where they weren't winning, and get much better, just get much more connected with the people in there. And what I found was the best people were sort of sitting in the back 3 rows and keeping themselves to themselves, and I wasn't getting to talk to them. So after about 2.5 years, I think we did about 30 events or something, and I started Candle, which was application only, people doing deals above £1 million, and that's what I started almost 3 years ago now.
Yeah, and I know it's a great kind of like closed event with some really good people, great knowledge, potential business ventures together, lots of synergy in the room as well, and deals passed around if they don't fit for somebody where they might work for somebody else. No, that's really, really, really good. And while we're on this, there's something else I wanted to touch on. I know you were working on an expensive project in London that went a bit horrible, but you...
I was working on a few.
Well, you had one very horrible one, but yes.
Which one was that? The one in Clapham?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I took a big swing at the London market in 2016 because up until 2016, I'd always nailed my timing. When I started the air hunting business, Kin, when I wrapped it up, when I invested in Reading, when I bought the flats in the middle of the credit crunch, I completed on those 2 flats in February 2019. When you look back, that was the very bottom of the market. And I just always nailed my timing. I sold the portfolio in Reading right at the peak of the market in March 2016 because of the 3% stamp duty surcharge and the Section 24. I thought, this is, I don't see any more growth here. The whole portfolio had gone up over £1 million in just a few years because they decided to extend Crossrail all the way to Reading and just went. So I thought, this is interesting. I can sell Reading in March 2016 and I can buy in London in front of the referendum, which is less than 3 months later. And I spoke to all my contacts in all the hedge funds who obviously bet very heavily on all this stuff. And they said, no, it's going to be close, but the vote will be to remain. And of course, the vote wasn't to remain. And I was way over geared. And I remember the next event in Knightsbridge after we'd voted to leave. I just stood up. There's 150 people in the room. And I just said, all this property you've seen me buy over the last 12 months, I don't reckon any of it's going to go very well now. Don't follow me into these deals and into this market because it's going to be unpleasant. And unfortunately, I was absolutely right. My 12 million of GDV slipped to 11. Theresa May ended up prime minister. In February, she was walking the dog on a Sunday with her husband and decided to call a snap election. Then it was a hung parliament. And my GDV went from 12 to 11 to closer to 10. I completed one of the deals and sold it to Octavia, which is a housing association, because they needed to relocate all the residents of Grenfell Tower. They were the only buyer. I lost money on that. I got the planning through on Clapham and Chiswick and Putney. I lost my transaction cost. The stamp duty was effective rate of 10%. It was not a good time, but I've got quite a lot of equity in this place, and I love my wife and my family, and I didn't want to sort of bring those troubles into the home any more than I already had done. And I didn't have other investors in first loss positions. All the equity was mine. I was on the front line. I'd stacked my deals properly. All my investors had proper second charge security, and I wrote redemption statements out, and I could see that I was able to return their money. But if I went on with the deals, there was a chance that I would lose money for my investors. And I thought my reputation was more valuable. And I fell on my sword and wrote off the losses.
I love that. I love what you've just said about your reputation being more valuable. And it's really refreshing to hear. I know that was the case because I know you cleared all your debts and you treated all of your investors the right way. And it's such a big thing, but sadly, so few people see that as key. It's all about protecting themselves and screw their investors. And that's just wrong. It's so refreshing and lovely to hear you saying that.
You've got to know what your position is. And I remember it very clearly on the Friday, the weekend of my 40th birthday. And if you remember, 9 years earlier or 6 years earlier, I was sat on Oxford Street thinking, what's going to make me more money by my 40th? I'll tell you how I spent my 40th. working from home, sat in my study, writing out redemption statements, making sure that I could return the money to my investors. And at the end of the day, I picked up my phone and I phoned Nick Cowell, who's a good mate of mine, who's also on the advisory board for Candor, who wouldn't have done it if I'd fucked over my investors, excuse my French. But I said, Nick, I think my deal's up. And he said, Matt, if you think your deal's up, then they're definitely, and we've all been there. I was like, why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have done it. He said, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. You just got to tidy it up and crack on.
Yeah.
But I think other people get in way too deep and they lose sight of their redemption statement. And by the time they go to work out their redemption statement, they're like, oh, there's just nothing left. And you can get into really big trouble. And it's happened a lot over the last, it's happening all the time now. Investors with second charges, you don't realize they're in first loss position, losing their money. And worse things than that as well. But I don't want to get too far into that. It's all very negative stuff.
We've had that conversation offline, no, but it's just so nice to hear how you behaved, because of course your reputation stayed intact and it's brought lots of other positives and good business opportunities to you. And now you've kind of got out the other side of that and you've got lots of new ventures that are sort of really, you know, climbing up right now, which is great.
In this business, your reputation is probably the most valuable thing you have, and then your network. Because we live in a very transparent world and everybody has a good sense of who the good guys are and who the crooks are. And if you want to do lots of business with lots of people, then you've got to try and make sure you keep your nose clean. And I'm not saying I'm a saint, but I'm definitely better than some others.
Yeah, there's a level, and I totally appreciate that. So that's probably an elegant bridge then into Tropolis. So do you want to share with us a bit about Tropolis, how it came about, who's it for, when it started and why it started?
So I've wanted to do Tropolis for a long time because I've always had this vision. And you've set me up very nicely, actually. And for the sake of the listeners, it wasn't deliberate. But as you recall, Ancestry.com really disrupted my business. And I've thought, all these people who travel across the country to sit in hotel rooms to learn stuff over the course of a 12-month period would be able to digest all that information if it was just presented in a really good format online with the tools and the cheat sheets and the downloads and everything they need right next to it, which you can iterate and update and just label it version 1, version 2, version 4. And you could do it in a club wrapper using some of the experience that we picked up from running Candor for almost 3 years now. And you could put in other parts that really helped them, like the introductions and the connections and all these sorts of things. And instead of asking them to partake in something which takes 12 months, it means they've got to spend time away from their family, take time off work, drag themselves and stay in hotels and all this sort of stuff. Do it in a much more dynamic way and basically do to property education something that's been a long time coming, but basically do to property education what Ancestry did to my microfiche. So there was a couple of things I needed to wait for. For all of 2018 and 2019, my household was like a pressure cooker because my wife was having a lot of chemotherapy. So I wanted to get through that, and that ended in January. But also there was another election, wasn't there, in December, and there was a chance that Jeremy Corbyn was going to be the Prime Minister. And I don't bet on elections anymore for obvious reasons. So I waited until mid-December and made sure that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't going to, wreck the country. And then I really escalated my efforts and ramped it up. And so Tropolis is, well, we sell it like a course because it's front end loaded with loads of really good material, and but we run it like a club, and it's for deals up to £1 million. And it's really because of the language we use and the voice that we found for it and the brand and the messaging and everything that's really resonating with. We've got an architect, we've got a couple of accountants, speaking to solicitors who want to join. We've got a couple of people who've got construction businesses that they run and they want to know how to joint venture with investors. Got a guy in New York who I may never meet physically, but he's a Geordie and he builds hospitals in New York for hundreds of millions of dollars for the business that he works for. We got clients in members in Scotland, and it's good. They're all smart, they're all intelligent. They all appreciate the fact that they can just binge on this material right at the beginning, ask questions in a weekly coaching call, connect with each other, learn how to do joint ventures properly, find out what works where and what doesn't work. and just really ramp up that growth curve, because you know that's the difference between sort of working it all out by yourself or someone handing you all the answers.
Being supported in the journey. No, that's really, really good.
Yeah, it's also a much bigger market because all these people have got businesses and families and careers. It's like, well, now you can do your property training with us, and not only that, it's cheaper for me to deliver it to you. So it's a reasonable price, which is the first time that's happened in property education, and you'll be surrounded by good people.
And as you said, you can reach to the wider audience because you've recorded some of it, and the bits that aren't recorded, that's a much smaller percentage of time. No, that's really good. I'm also really pleased to hear that Nat's much better now as well, which is brilliant.
She's fit as a fiddle. She caught coronavirus 3 weeks ago. The whole family's in Switzerland for a couple of months, but the kids, we think the kids picked up the virus at some play centre that they were at, a children's farm. But no, Nat caught the virus, and I think the virus met its match. She had it dealt with within 3 days. She's just out of quarantine for a fortnight. So she's fit as a fiddle.
Oh, that's brilliant.
A long time coming.
Brilliant. And funnily enough, I was going to ask you, how has coronavirus impacted your business? So you shared the personal side. What about the business? What's it done to you?
So I launched Tropolis the week before everybody started realizing that we were going to have to lock down the whole country and everything. And obviously everybody started putting their courses online. I thought, oh, this is really annoying. I wanted to have the party to myself, at least for a little bit. But the truth is I was much more prepared because I've been working on it since 12 months ago, and everything's been properly recorded, properly published, properly documented. It's like our modules are like Wikipedia of property investing and property development, and it's very well packaged. It looks really smart. But so on the one hand, I thought, oh, this is a bit annoying now. Everyone's been forced online, but actually not everyone's been forced online. A lot of people have furloughed all their staff and they're not doing courses. They're just postponing it. And the truth is, I need everybody to be a bit better at Zoom so that me and my team can speak to them on Zoom and do the demonstrations. And that's probably sped that up a bit. And by the time they see what we've done and what the offering is, you know, they're all coming in. And so the lockdown was, it was very disruptive. You know, we've got a lot of clients across the 2 clubs that we run, like a lot. And I was very worried about their businesses, and some of them, you know, were obviously going through really tough times. But we also had new people join because they thought it looked like a good time to get stuck into property and escalate their efforts. But the lockdown was tough for everyone, right? Homeschooling, and we locked down really aggressively because Nat had only just finished her chemotherapy, so that was really intense. I mean, it was really intense. It was horrible. But I've learned a lot of new skills. We do our own digital marketing in-house. I've learned how to do all that stuff, and one of the team helps me with that. So you know, I think my growth curve is nice and steep, really, which is what I'm always after.
Is there such thing as a typical day for you? And what might it look like, or does that not really exist? Is every day different?
I wondered if you'd asked that. I should have prepared the answer. I am very focused on routine. I will not get done what I want to get done unless I prioritize it and focus on it and say no to everything else. So I very aggressively try to keep my emails clear. The first thing I do every day is search for the word unsubscribe in my inbox, and I hit all those, get them out of the way. I don't have any leads for any deals coming into my inbox. Really, I should use a different email address, but I just got a rule and they go into a folder. I've got about 3,000 unread emails in that folder. If you look at all your leads coming in all day, every day, add up how much time you're spending a year doing that, and then think about your growth curve. So I have 2 telephones so that I can sometimes get away from work so that I can rest more and be more productive the next day. I exercise twice a week. My focus at the moment is 4 strategy calls a day with people who are serious about joining Tropolis. Focus on one major task. Use as many systems and tools as I can to automate as much of that. And just try not to overburden myself, which is easily done. But you know, I have a couple of meetings as well. I had a really interesting meeting yesterday, which I won't go into. But I meet a lot of interesting people, and that's one thing I will make a bit of time for. But if I make time to meet everybody, I do nothing other than meeting people. I don't get anything done. So you have to be really strict.
No, that makes sense. So given the businesses you founded, the businesses you've grown, the businesses you've sold, and the deals you've completed, what would you say from your perspective is the deal or business you've been most proud of, and why?
There's someone at the door, but we'll just let him go. I have no idea who it is. I'll just check my diary. What was the question? Which are the best businesses?
So from, say, looking at the businesses you've grown and sold, the deals you've kind of like taken from beginning to end, what one item is something you're most proud of, and why?
Well, this was a deal. This was a deal. I was never supposed to. I've got my AirPods so I can talk and walk. This was a deal. I bought it off market and it was supposed to be a flip, but we moved into it and we added a load of value, and it's obviously tax free. And it's Amazon. She's not even here, and there's parcels arriving for her. So this was a great deal. You know, I lived around the corner from my office on Curzon Street when I bought this, and then we got married. And I said to Nat, look, if we're going to have a family, we're going to pay more money for an inferior house. Let's keep this place. We got a cinema down below because I put the basement in. Reading was great because it just appreciated aggressively. The gross yields were like, I was buying on a gross yield of 12%, which was pretty good. I know that some people can do better than that in other places, or if they manage to pull out all their money and so forth. But you know, my investor was quite risk averse, and that was the model we stuck to. So Reading was good. The air hunting business was good. This place was definitely good. Candour's good. Candour's not about making lots of money. I give 15% of the profits to charity just to make sure the members understand that.
Oh.
But the value in the network is unbelievable. You know, if I
do you have a favorite one that it doesn't even have to be the one with the most money? The one for you is the one that you were most proud of.
I think Kin was really special because we were just young and fresh and hungry. And I worked through the night on Wednesdays to make that business work. And my business partner would do one Wednesday midnight all the way through, and I would do the next one. And one person in 6 years left because all the values were aligned and we really loved each other. It was great. But Tropolis as well is a game changer. Like, I've got to plug the new business, but Tropolis is a game changer. And that's the culmination of everything I've learned from Candour and Reading and being productive and being efficient and all that stuff. It's all been poured into there.
Funnily enough, that is a really good, elegant bridge into my next question, which is, if somebody's coming along, they know a little bit about property, don't have a lot of money, really need a lot of support, what would you recommend they do to start building their foundations from solid grounds so they learn the right way, bearing in mind their funds are limited? Where would you direct them?
So I do speak to people each week who are in that position, and I tell them, like, this is your expertise, this is where you make money, this is how you're going to be able to put food on the table. So keep that going and learn as much as you can whilst you keep that going. Because I speak to other people who've jacked in their job and they haven't done anything for 12 months and they're down to their last 50 grand, which might not last very long. And you know, I think it's irresponsible to push them into property and say, yeah, you got a shot here, you can make it. Because at the same time, I spoke to a really smart guy last week, and next week he's going to be driving for Amazon to make ends meet. So it's the industry's got a lot to answer to in terms of that, because it causes a lot of damage, puts a lot of stress in people's lives and affects their families. So you got to make sure that whatever you're going to do is going to work, and that means having a good relationship with someone who's doing it successfully and can show you how to make it work. And you've got to be prudent as well. You know, I thought I was going to buy all these HMOs in Reading and it was going to give me, you know, loads of money for the rest of my life, but you always come up short. Property.
Yeah, and it's good to hear you say that as well. They need to be drawing in an income from somewhere to supplement them, because property's not going to give them the money just like that unless they're super, super lucky.
A 50 grand a year income versus 50 grand today in your bank account, you'll burn through that 50 grand and then you'll have nothing. Whereas a 50 grand income just coming in all the time is really good. There's another reason why I started Tropolis, because after what we went through as a family through 2018 and 2019, I don't want to have to worry about money or time. If ever there's a crisis and I'm needed to be, a much better father and a much better husband. So, you know, I could be out running around trying to chase deals and developments, but I'm trying to build something really, really solid for my family. And this is the best way that I can package up the value, monetize it, and just have a bit of patience and do the deals later on. I really want to build another portfolio. I'm dying to do it. All my mates keep selling businesses, and they say, like, Sydney, let's do a portfolio. I'm like, I'm busy.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So is there a kind of like a habit you have now that you wish you had when you first started out in business?
Oh, there's still habits I wish I had. Yeah. I mean, good ones.
Good. You know, that you have now that you wish you'd known about when you first started out that really help you.
Yeah. I mean, look, if I knew then what I know now, I'd probably be in. I was going to say Monaco, but I don't know if Monaco is such a great place to live. But south of France or something like that. I don't know, just all the systems and tools and experience. I've always been quite good at hiring people, but I've gotten better even still. The way I go about it and how I find them is good. You can't scale a business unless you can get good people into it. And that's why your brand is quite important, not just so that your customers are drawn to it and that it appeals to them, but also so that you can build a good team, because the better your brand looks, the more people are willing to work with you. And that's really important. I guess
having your value underpinning what you're doing and the people you're bringing in to work for you effectively.
Yeah, but if there's one other asset that I've got now that I, you know, obviously didn't have as much 5 years ago or 10 years ago, definitely not 20 years ago, is just I've worked hard to make sure that everybody understands who I am and what I'm about. And then all sorts of interesting people reach out to me. So the lunch I had yesterday was with a guy from Monaco who is just raised a load of money for a new digital bank that's called Ziglu. And the guy who's founded it built Starling Bank's platform. And really interesting people doing really interesting stuff. And, you know, I very nearly said, no, I'm sorry, I'm doing this today and this is what I do, and lovely to meet you, but later. But, you know, like, I wouldn't be asked to go and meet people like that. There's a very, very, very famous property developer who's trying to make sure that a certain candidate becomes the next mayor of London. I got invited to his house 2 weeks ago. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't, you know, done everything I've done over the last few years. And, you know, it's 30 of us at his house. He's got like 2 acres in the middle of Chelsea, and it's phenomenal. So, you know, all that stuff is valuable, but you've got to know how to monetize it, right?
So it's really about the importance of you having the right values, behaving in the right way and doing the right thing so that people understand how ethical you are and that kind of thing as well.
You can behave however you like, and the people who are similar to you will find you. Yeah. And the people who think that you represent some sort of value will be drawn to you. But I've previously been quite outspoken about the Ponzi's, and part of the reason for that was because I wanted everyone to know that I really am very seriously against the Ponzi's because of the damage it does to families and things like that. And also, the operators of the Ponzi's outbid everyone on the sites because they don't need to make a profit, and they all hide in plain sight. But part of that was to just A, educate people, but B, also it was a great opportunity for me to communicate my values so that people could know a bit more about what I stand for. So you have to be prepared. Your brand is a way of demonstrating your values, the fonts that you use, the language you use, all of it, and that will resonate with certain people, and they'll be drawn to you. And some people will you know, it will do the opposite and they'll hate you for whatever reason, but that's fine as well. So like push them away and welcome in the right people.
You're clear on who you want to attract, which is great. I've got one more question to ask you before I hand over to Sarah and Sam to start quizzing you. So my last question to you is this. Is there a book you read and read again that really motivates you, that resets your mind, one that, you know, makes such a difference to your being?
It's a big book.
Tools of the Titans.
That's what's sitting on the that's on the couch at the moment. I literally grabbed it to put the laptop on top of it for this interview. It's a good book. Tim Ferriss has done, you know, with that book what I've done with Tropolis, or what I'm trying to do with Tropolis. I don't want to compare myself to Tim Ferriss because he's obviously a legend. but it's great. It's packed with loads of stuff, and you could just rummage through there in any order. You don't read it cover to cover, and you just pluck out little pieces of info, and you've got to be able to implement all this stuff as quickly as you can, if you like. And when you've got the right systems and tools and the team around you, you can implement lots of stuff very quickly, and then your growth curve can be nice and steep. And it's easier to do that when you've got a small team. But that's a great book. I'm not a massive reader. I really should read more, but it's just, I'm always working. I just work like a nutter.
It's what works for you, but sometimes having a book like that just to reset you, refresh you, if you're having a bad day, is pretty good.
Yes, very good.
Now, okay, I'm going to hand over to the ladies now. So I'm going to start with Sam. So Sam, do you have some questions for Matt?
It's been a while since I've been interviewed by a copper.
Sam, you're on mute, Sam.
Oh, it's perfect.
I was actually going to ask you about your smash and grab model, Matt, because obviously that resonates with me. You said that you were using the smash and grab model in Reading. Can you explain that?
Well, normally when you hear people talk about smash and grab model in Reading, it involves stolen cars and jewelries, but jewelers. But no, basically, if you want to get a good deal, you want to avoid as much of the competition as you possibly can. It's something we teach our clients. So you need the right property, the right vendor, and the right circumstances. The right property is something that you can improve, extend, change the use, which everybody's like. That's the obvious thing. But you need the right vendor as well. They need to have a need for the money more than they need the property, so that they're a serious vendor. And the more motivated they are, then obviously the better it's going to be for you. And the right circumstances is anything that just keeps away a lot of the competition, if you know how to negotiate. So, this place, which I bought in 2012, the owner was the nephew of the lady who'd lived here forever. Foxton's, which is 3 doors down the road, told him it was worth 1.2 million. And I told him I wouldn't go above £1 million because the stamp duty would all go through the roof and my numbers just didn't work. I negotiated 985. Someone came along who lives in the apartment there. He's a very good investor in my club now, but this is how I met him. He came along and tried to gazump me and offered him the 1.2, but I was able to hold him to the 985 for reasons which I could go into, but it was a probate, so then there's going to be 40% inheritance tax. It was whatever was left was going to get split 3 ways. I said, look, you can take my 985 because it's there and I'm not going to chip you. Here's my references to say that I don't do that. But everybody's telling me I should chip you and I should drop my price in the 11th hour, and I'm not going to do that. So the 985 is there and you can have it, or you can take your chances with him. And then you leave a really long silence and they always say, okay, let's do it. So, but you've got to know how to avoid a competition. And so smash and grab in Reading would be something that's not yet been put on Rightmove. And you want to get it as early as you can, because maybe the vendor's quite happy with the offer that you put forward and they'll take it. So I had all the agents bringing me deals that were going to go to the other agents. And I said, tell the vendor that you've got one buyer, you need one shot, and then they can give it to the other agent if they want. And the other agent would phone me up at the end of the day and said, oh, I've got something coming on my books tomorrow. I said, yeah, I've just had an offer accepted on it today. They're like, how did you do that? But it helps when you had all these years of air hunting, because, you learn all these research skills and these tricks and things. Eventually, I mapped London in 3D using LiDAR data from satellite and OS maps and title plans. And I hired back a couple of people from a tracing business to trace all the owners of these properties. But, I had to shelve it all in 2017 when I realized that my deals weren't going very well. So smash and grab, it's either got to be languishing because it was overpriced. I bought something for 1.45 million, which was original asking price 1.9, and everyone had seen it and everyone had discounted it. It was a ridiculous asking price. And then eventually no one was going back to look at it, and I was able to buy it for 1.45. So that was one that was languishing. But at the other end of the spectrum, smash and grab, just get in there as early as you can and try and negotiate the best price you can.
Being bold and keeping your posture.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And were you working with investors on these? Is that how you could keep that posture, knowing that you can produce the proof of funds very easily?
Yep. So the investor who had the demanding job in the city, he never saw any of the houses. I don't think he even knew how many there were. And so, yeah, I joint ventured the portfolio in Reading with an investor. But I also had some equity that I could invest myself, which meant I got better terms with the investor, but also didn't have a track record. I bought my first flat in 2000 and tried to refurbish it, and I didn't really add any value to it. I bought a few buy-to-lets. So by 2009, I'd bought 4 properties, one of which I'd sold my half to my brother, and the other 3 I had. But I'd never refurbished a property or, converted the garages or done the extension and all that sort of stuff. And you have to learn somewhere. That was part of the reason why I picked Reading and doing those house shares, just because I could learn really fast. But even if you can't, even if you haven't got proof of funds to do a cash purchase, you can have proof of funds for the deposit, and you can have your agreement in principle from the lender, and you can start getting references from the estate agents, and you can get references from your buyers. I've got a whole folder of people that I bought property off that said, Matt's a good guy, he didn't chip, he stuck to his price, he used a good solicitor, all that stuff helps to tip him over the line. And none of that involves offering more money for the property.
Yeah, that's good. I've not heard about the referencing from people you bought from estate agents.
Yeah, there's good value in that.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you make it work with the investors? I mean, how does those conversations start, and how do you work out it's a good match?
So I've been an investor, I've been a lender, I've been a borrower, and I've been a JV partner, and I don't think I've done 2 loans or 2 deals that are the same. So you could either do straight debt, and the rate needs to be commensurate to the security, and I wouldn't include a PG as any meaningful security. We've all seen that recently, where people have been giving PGs for loans and paying 10% per annum, but they've just got all these PGs out there and all this debt, and the debt's way larger than their assets. So proper security, like a charge on a piece of property. PGs between friends and family, I think is fine, and anyone can do what they want ultimately. But although I did do a loan to someone on a PG, and that dragged on a bit, and I began to get a bit nervous about my loan, but I got it back. But you can also do a blend of interest and profit share. The profit share is harder to work out because you got to do all the bookkeeping at the end, and what's to say that all the costs are accurate and all the costs are correct. That flooring could be going into another flat where there's a smarter investor who's protected his downside risk a bit better. So you've got to be careful when you're sharing profits. There's been other people offering profit share, and then the construction business has taken all the profits, and then investors have had nothing. So you've got to watch all that. But straight loans are really easy because the day the money goes in, the day that comes out. You can work out the interest, and you can clear the debt and pay the interest really quickly. And the better you get at returning money, and the faster and the more often you do that, the better chance you've got of it coming back, right?
Keep the promise to the investors, pay back on time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just about brand, what would you recommend to somebody who's just sort of starting out, how to sort of develop that brand? You were saying about how by you talking about how other people have got bad practices, that was enabling you to show your good practices, which was developing your brand. How would you recommend that to somebody who's just sort of trying to grow their brand, whether that be an individual or a group of people?
So this is the thing, right? If you sit someone in an empty room and there's just a table, and on the table there's a glass of water or a can of Coke or a calculator or something, the chances are they're not going to show a huge amount of interest in it. But if you put a person in that room, it's probable that they're going to have a conversation, because people are not interested in objects, and people are not as interested in a logo or a business anywhere near as much as they are interested in people. And Richard Branson's done it very well, Elon Musk does it very well, other people try not to do it quite as much, like Darcy, who owns Twitter. I wouldn't recognize him if I walked past him in the street. But if you want to acquire interest and you want to acquire customers, whether you want to do it or not, you are your brand, and they will be 1,000 times more interested in you as they will be in the logo on the front of this notebook. And that's the truth. So, and I'm learning this really well with Tropolis, because obviously we're doing our own digital marketing, and I have to put my face out there because the cost of acquisition, the cost per acquisition comes right down, because people engage with people a lot more than they do with a logo. So that's the first comment I have on brand. Like, you are your brand, and if you want it to work effectively, don't have an Instagram profile with your company name on it, because no one's going to know who's behind it, and they won't care, and they'll flick straight past it. And actually, in fact, I think my Instagram profile looks like a bit of a war zone at the moment, because there's all sorts of stuff that's gone on there. But you just got to use your social media profiles to express your values and portray your values as effectively as you can, really. Does that actually answer your question? Did I go off on a bit of a tangent?
No, it's about owning it yourself, being you, showing your true values, and that's what people are going to connect with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's authenticity, isn't it? So your brand reflects your authenticity.
Yeah.
I think so. And actually, and do you know what? This is the thing that I'm absolutely fascinated by, because property industry is full of entrepreneurs. It's like bursting at the seams with entrepreneurs and people who have businesses and want to make money. And I said to my team, I was like, I cannot believe that I've got an opportunity to do this with Tropolis, where you just package it up very differently and the value is through the roof, and you can make it so powerful. And above all else, you can pick up business by just telling the truth. Like, you don't have to lie or spin a load of BS. I was like, this is great. I'm going to be really good at this. Let's do it. So
that is brilliant. Let's hand over to Sarah. So she's got a few questions for you.
Yeah, hi Matt. We've got a lot of people listening online, and we've had a few questions. Yep.
Okay.
So Fiona Talbot has said,
Matt, oh no, not Fiona. She's going to ask me a really tricky question. It's going to be horrible.
So she's been quite easy on you. So she says, you're a fantastic connector. Have you got any advice for, she calls herself an introverted nerd?
I've got a club. I've got a networking club full of people that hate networking. I hate networking. I know you're going to laugh, but I hate networking. I just find it like the most awkward, horrible thing to walk up to people that you don't know, and you don't know anything about them. They don't know you, and they're like, well, what do you do? And you're like, oh God, well, you know, what I do is a bit shit really, but I'll tell you. And I hate it. I hate it, but you get better at it. I got invited to this guy's house 2 weeks ago, and I nearly turned it down. I was like, look, I'm really not sure you guys want me there, but he's a really nice guy. You know, him and his brother were well over £1 billion. And I was like, I'm so glad I went. I've been on the phone to him a couple of times since. You just got to put yourself out there, really, and have a glass of wine on the way in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. When I started a networking meeting in Southampton 4 or 5 years ago, and I couldn't speak when that sounds crazy, but I just used to get everyone in the room, and then someone would bang something on the table for me, and I'd just say the minimum words possible. So what you're saying basically is practice and getting out there is the only way.
Practice getting out there. Yeah, and just being aware of when your inner voice is sabotaging the opportunity. but yeah, I'm definitely not a natural networker. That's the reason why I started. Like, I guess, I don't know, it's like a sledgehammer to crack a nut, I guess, but I've probably made up for it a bit now. There's nothing natural about it.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I don't think any of us think Fiona's an introverted nerd anyway. I think she's doing herself a disservice there. Fiona's
a legend. I'd love to catch up with you, Fiona. I see you doing so well. I'm really jealous.
Awesome. Okay, I'm very conscious we're approaching 10 o'clock. So I know you've mentioned loads of different things that you've done, business and property. If you had 100 grand and you were starting out, you had all the knowledge you've got, but you had 100 grand, what would you do with that 100 grand?
I'd use one of the great people in Tropolis to bring me a bungalow somewhere outside the southeast, where I'd buy it, have a sensible amount of debt on there, and we'd do the deal together. And I'd make sure that I get a minimum return before the profits are split. And assuming that we're above that threshold, the profits can be split, but I won't take less than X.
So that's flip it. You would do a flipping model. You got
to grow the pots. You got to flip it, and you got to do that within a limited company, so you pay less tax, and you're gonna have to do that a few times. You know, I'm gonna have to do that again now. Once Tropolis is up and running, I will find someone who's got lots of money and doesn't want the hassle and the admin and the time, and I'll use my contacts and my network and my skills, and I'll run it, and he can have a return of whatever per annum, and we'll share the equity in the business however we end up sharing it. but we'll buy 3, sell 2, and keep 1, or maybe we'll sell, or whatever you agree with the investor. But what you don't want to do is like sink all your money into one deal and then be sitting there scratching your head wondering where the next pot of cash is coming from. You've got to recycle the cash. But then there's other people who don't need to recycle the cash because they're busy running their businesses, and all they want to do is push the profits into the market and let the market carry them. And if you do the maths, you can make, you know, if you've got the right leverage in there and you're in a market that's appreciating, that's where the big lumps come from in 3 or 4 years' time. That's how I bought this place. The flats I bought in February 2009, one of them was a 55 grand deposit, and the gain was 110 grand 24 months later. And you know, that deposit was trebled, and very little effort and work going into this 2-bed 2-bath flat that I bought. So horses for courses, really. But recycling cash is important, unless you're really busy doing something over here that's working well for you, in which case go and get as much capital appreciation as you can, because you don't need the income, presumably.
Well,
everyone's got different circumstances, right?
Yes, exactly. No, and everyone would have a different answer to that question, so it's always really interesting. Okay, just finally, have you got one piece of advice, property or business advice, that you've been given that's really helped you push on with everything you've been doing, that you wish you'd heard earlier?
Is there one thing that I don't know? It's probably there's a few things actually that have stuck in my head. Okay, so Mike Ingle spoke at Knightsbridge, and there's one thing he said that was really stuck with me more than anything else. And he said, the builder's not your mate. Like, the builder is there to take risk for you. Like, no matter how well you get on with him, he's not your mate. And Mike Ingle was developer of the decade. There was another thing he said, which I didn't quite clock at the time, but he was talking about Ponzi's. He said, when you invest in a deal, you back the deal, you don't back the business. And what he was referring to mini bonds and Ponzi's and things like that. And then Simon Woodruff, who started Yo Sushi, spoke at one of our events, and he said something that stuck with me as well. He said, I could have made lots more money buying companies and selling them and flipping companies, but my heart and soul went into Yo Sushi, and everything about me just came out, all his stage production career, because he only started that business in his 40s. But he used to build stages and things like that. And that's why Yo Sushi had these conveyor belts and these robots and things like that. And he said, I could have made more money doing that, but this is where my passion was. And that's why I do. And that's why I'm quite happy to do Tropolis, because I love setting up the systems. I love meeting all the interesting people. I love talking to them when I see them. And I know what my strengths and weaknesses are, and I know what makes me buzz, and I know what makes me get out of bed in the morning. And it's building small businesses like this. I do love it.
So stick with your passions.
Yeah, definitely, because it's going to get tough, and unless you're passionate about it, you're going to bail out.
Agree. Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome. Are we done?
Yes, Matt, that has been absolutely amazing. So people listening in, if they want to connect with you, where would they go search you out? What's the best way for them to contact you?
No, my Facebook is a bit unreliable because I don't know what you're supposed to do when it's all full and everything. LinkedIn's quite good. I get my messages on LinkedIn. Connect with me on Instagram. And check out, you can check out tropolis.uk and candor.org. Whilst I was off in January dealing with agro at home and all the healthcare issues that we had, the team packaged up a magazine, which I didn't know they were going to do actually. So the club's got its own magazine now, and every page in that magazine is a member of Candor. The adverts, the articles, the projects, all of it. So that makes an interesting read, and that's on the Candor website, and it's a free magazine with some case studies in there as well, with some juicy deals.
No, that is absolutely brilliant. And Matt, you've been fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I hope I didn't disappoint.
You were brilliant. Thank you.
It's still so early as well. A whole day's work to do.
Have a good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.